Hello, this is Justin Williams with the Wolfpacker Podcast. I'm joined today, as always, by editor of the Wolfpacker.com and fellow co-host Matt Carter. Today we're going to break down NC State's upcoming Week 4 opponent, UConn. The Huskies come to Carter-Finley Stadium on Saturday night at 7:30 p.m. For what should be another tune-up opportunity for the Pack as it gets ready for Week 5 against Clemson. We will talk about UConn, what to expect in this game, might even peek ahead just a little bit into the future in Week 5, and we'll also start off by recapping upon further review what else we've gathered from that Texas Tech win in Week 3. But before we do that, just some quick reminders for the listeners and viewers at home. Please subscribe, rate, and review this podcast wherever you listen to us. We're on Apple, Spotify, Google Play, wherever you listen to podcasts, we're there. So please go do that and support the pod. We're also in video form on YouTube, so you can watch this podcast whenever you like. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, give this video a thumbs up, and drop a comment while you're at it. You guys have been doing a great job of that, so please keep up the great work. We appreciate all of the engagement on these podcasts. Last but not least, head over to the Wolfpacker.com. Sign up for a special 1-year deal for just $1. Gets you a full year of premium subscription to the Wolfpacker.com. All the great work at the On3 network. Premium information, recruiting news, the latest and greatest, everything NC State athletics. Matt Carter and Ethan McDowell put in so much work and have a lot of great content, and a lot of it's premium, so you can't get it for free, but for just $1 you can get that content. So head over there, support them, support the Wolfpacker, and take advantage of that special deal. All right, Matt, let's kick off with maybe an upon further review, because kind of like Week 2 Charleston Southern. I'm sitting here looking at my notes and saying, well, there's really not a whole lot to talk about UConn other than the fact that UConn is 1-3 entering this matchup. Its lone win coming against FCS Connecticut or Central Connecticut State, 28-3 win over what looks to be the Blue Devils or the Devils of some sort. I'm just looking at their logo on ESPN here. Kind of look like the Blue Devils, but not Duke. Coming off a 59-0 loss in the Big House to Michigan. Before that, lost 48-14 to Syracuse and lost in Week 1, 31-20 to Utah State. Now, respectable ending there, but this is the same Utah State team that I think got blown out 55-0 by Bama.
They also just lost to Weber State in the FCS by 4 touchdowns.
So they're also not very good. No. So I guess the conclusion I'm going to is that UConn's not very good, and we probably don't need to spend a whole lot of time talking about them. But let's start with an upon further review. Matt, you've now had a few days to reflect here on that late night game between the Pack and the Red Raiders. So, anything coming out of Dave Doran's Monday availability or anything else that is kind of you've thought about this week that you didn't bring up on the post-game reflections podcast that you'd kind of like to kick us off with?
Not necessarily anything new, but more reaffirmation of probably what you and I talked about Sunday. I think we talked to Tim Beck. We recorded Wednesday. I'm actually in the lobby of the indoor practice facility with the big screen TV over my head. If anybody's wondering, this is not my house. That's not my TV. But, they're probably not as much concern, at least being expressed outwardly, about the offense and the performance against Texas Tech. And a few things that I think probably bear out that need to be worth reminding is that they did, they like to say they would have 14 more points if the 2 touchdowns, one fumbled away, one taken off by a penalty, had happened as drawn up. little bit misleading. It would actually have been 10 points because they did get a field goal out of the one possession where Anthony Belton got with blocking pretty much through the end zone, apparently, when the touchdown pass was going to Devin Leary. But there was, just a general feeling, look, if they get touchdowns on those two possessions, they'll probably push them 40 points in the game, and nobody's talking about how the offense is sluggish or not in rhythm or anything like that. So more of a kind of look, just little things, little details. It's not a big picture issue on offense. It's just more eliminating penalties, eliminating turnover, those types of things. And also, I got Tim Beck. I asked him straight up, did the play calling in the second half kind of change based on circumstance? You're playing an up-tempo Texas Tech team. Was there more of it? I didn't use this word. I'm just paraphrasing myself here, but more of an effort to be a bit more methodical, ball control and offense. And he said, absolutely. And he said, people probably didn't like the way the offense looked. I looked at it, and we had the ball for 19 minutes and scored one touchdown and should have scored two touchdowns. And against Texas Tech, which had the ability to score quickly, we have control of the game. Let's not do anything to lose the game now. And let's not do anything to give them an opportunity to win the game. That they had to be smart about how they approached it in the second half. So I do think those things maybe factor into how the offense looked as I look upon further review. But, I think it pretty much played out like we saw it played out. NC State was a better team. The defense rose up to the occasion, played with an elite effort, as Tony Gibson said yesterday, and the offense had some things to work through.
Yeah, and that kind of football, it's not the most entertaining to watch. So that I think that's kind of part of the reason for the concern. You see it in the NFL all the time. When a team has a game in hand, the smart coaches will
shorten the game
run
up.
the football. They will take the air out of the ball. I mean, I'm sitting here on the West Coast, watch the 49ers on Sunday. They had a stinker of a game against the Seahawks. The most exciting thing that happened was, unfortunately, rookie quarterback Trey Lance got hurt for the season. Jimmy comes in. They go up by a couple touchdowns. In the second half, they had a 8-minute drive in the fourth quarter. And that's kind of what NC State was trying to do with Texas Tech. So I see that. I agree with that. I think it's smart coaching. It's winning football. That said, I'd push back maybe a little bit on the two touchdowns that were reversed. I'd probably say, even if those go the different way, I think we're having a different conversation. We're saying, look, NC State put up almost 40 points. Maybe there's not as much criticism about the offense, but neither of those plays changed really any of the stats in the passing game or showed how much explosiveness was in the passing game. The one that was called back was a trick play with Thayer Thomas to Devin Leary. It's great to see. You'd like to have those points, but trick plays don't really tell me anything about your offense. You can only run them but so often. And then the second one was Sumo. I mean, he still gets credit for all, about 50 of those yards. He just dropped it right before he went into the end zone. So really the only statistical difference that made was the final score, which of course is the most important stat. But I think most of the conversation this week and going into the Clemson game, because it doesn't really matter what NC State does against UConn. Devin Leary could throw for 500 yards, and I still think there's going to be questions of, okay, well, great, can you do it against Clemson? So I think that's the main concern, is that, the defense looks like it's living up to all of the preseason expectations and maybe looks even a little bit better than we thought. Whereas the offense, all of the expectations going into this year is Devin Leary's going to have another step up type season. The passing game was towards the top of the ACC last year. If you expect an improvement, you'd expect it to be one of the best, if not the best passing offense in the ACC. And it's just been far from that so far. Not saying they can't correct that, not saying they can't change that, but when is that change going to happen, if it's going to happen, or is it going to be a pivot in the offensive system? But I think that leads us into a good way to talk about this game, because that is what I'm looking for the most. Is I want to see NC State come out in the first half be explosive through the passing game. Because look, you're playing a team that you should beat by 40.
Hmm.
It doesn't. You don't really need to play what the defense gives you. You just, I mean, it's a nice dress rehearsal, right? You run the play calls that you want to see the most development with. It doesn't really matter how much you beat UConn by, as long as you beat them comfortably and you can bench the starters in the second half. Find a way to get that chemistry going between Leary and those receivers, because if you can get him connected with Devin Carter, if you can get him connected with, I mean, he seems already connected with Thayer Thomas. I think that might be more of like a targeting type issue, play calling type, make more attempts to get him the ball. But Anthony Smith, Julian Gray, building that chemistry down the road is going to pay dividends in the ACC play.
Yeah, and I'm going to give you a stat about Connecticut that I ran up this morning. You're in the last two games against two good teams. I happen to think right now Syracuse makes the case for being a borderline top 25 team. Probably a little bit fortunate to win at home against Purdue.
You didn't. I don't know if you saw the end of that Purdue game, but that
Yeah,
was.
I saw it. And you're a little bit lucky that Purdue self-imploded there to let Syracuse. But the bottom line is they have beaten Louisville handedly at home. They beat Connecticut handedly on the road and beat a respectable Big Ten team at home. That same Big Ten team almost beat Purdue. And
Calling Purdue respectable is maybe not something we can say for much longer, but continue.
but I will say that Purdue team had Penn State beat until the last. They've lost both of their games on the last drive, and again, but
Yeah,
so
yeah.
two good teams. Obviously, we know the Wolverines are good. You mentioned the score of those games, but the total yards in those two games, Connecticut had 312 total yards combined. So if
Oh,
you do the math, that's about 156 yards. That is 156 yards per game, total offense. The other teams had Syracuse and Michigan, 935 total yards. So we're at UConn was averaging 156 yards per game. Their opponents were averaging over 460 yards per game. So it's not just in the score. What you're seeing statistically is the opponents are moving the ball up and down the field, and UConn is having a hard time moving the football at all. And so this is a game of let's get ourselves right once again. They looked a lot better against Texas Tech than they did against East Carolina, right? So they used Charleston Southern to get a little bit right, particularly on defense with the tackling and all that, and looked a whole lot better against Texas Tech. Now use Connecticut to get some more things right, especially on offense, to get better against Connecticut. I think that's kind of the goal here. I mean, you have to take care of business. You cannot be, assuming anything. You have to come out. I think that's going to be the key is are we motivated to play this game? We all know where it is on the schedule. You just were very hyped up to play Texas Tech. The stadium was electric from all accounts. And next week you're playing Clemson. In between is Connecticut that has won since 2016. Their record is 11-52. It's you just gotta find a way to get yourself up to play this game. I think being a night game will help because they'll have all day to kind of amp up to be ready to play. But and then to add to insult to injury to poor Connecticut, you really feel for them. They lost their starting quarterback in the first game of the year against Utah State. They had a good running back named Nathan Carter who had three really nice games, including against Syracuse, and he was up over 400 yards rushing when he hurt his shoulder in Ann Arbor, and he will be out multiple weeks. And so they're without their starting quarterback. They're without their quality running back. They're having to turn to a true freshman quarterback who was playing high school football in South Florida this time a year ago against NC State's defense. Yeah, good luck to the young man. He was 4-16 passing against the Wolverines last week. So this is a kind of a get-right type of game. Try to get through the game healthy, see if you can stay through it motivated, and to kind of analyze, okay, where's the passing game better than, say, Charleston Southern? I think that's what you have to compare it to, right?
Yeah.
I told Chip Alexander from the Nugent Observer and I were talking before availability on Wednesday, and kind of joked about Charleston Southern and Connecticut would be a good game, and then I kind of clarified maybe not a good game, but a competitive game. And so maybe compare how you looked against Connecticut versus how you looked against Charleston Southern. If there's any kind of struggle, that's not a promising sign. So maybe beyond the first quarter. I mean, you might see a UConn team that back against the wall, they're tired of getting their asses kicked. New coach firing them up, they'll come out here swinging them, throwing haymakers early before the talent takes over. But even that seemed kind of far-fetched.
Well, I agree. It's another Charleston Southern game with, maybe the only difference being that the average athlete on the UConn sideline might be a little bit higher caliber than a Charleston Southern, just in the sense that you are getting some FBS level athletes versus, playing an FCS opponent. But other than that, yeah, I mean, I would expect a similar final score. UConn's going to have trouble scoring the ball at all. So, how quickly do you pull the defensive starters? I think that's another, and it's not an easy choice to make because, if you want to be conservative about it, and I mean, heck, you could even make the decision to just not play a Peyton Wilson or any of the guys that, were banged up recently or just kind of, getting right with mentally. But you can't really do that because then you kind of take them out of a rhythm before a big game in week 5. And especially, a guy like Wilson, I mean, he played last week, played the whole game. He doesn't have any designation on him. So you can't, I mean, I guess you could, save him for week 5, like load management, but we don't really see that at the college level that much. I'm sure he'll want to play a home game. But do you take him out after the first half? If you're up 30-0 in the second quarter, do you go ahead and pull the starters then?
I think you want to get at least one series in the second half because it's kind of the old adage, you want to get them out of halftime, still in that routine of playing after halftime. The whole get sit down, come back up and play after the break. But yeah, and in that circumstance, I think ideally it's like Charleston Southern, right? Both starters got maybe a drive or two in the second half, and then they were done. And I think that's the best case scenario, and it could happen. It very well could happen. The other best case scenario is that Connecticut commits to trying to run the football, unlike Charleston Southern, so that we're not laboring through a nearly 4-hour long 55-3 football.
Oh no, you gotta keep trying to play to win the game. When you're down 6 touchdowns in the fourth quarter, keep firing, man. Keep firing.
Yeah. Sure. But
yeah,
I will say one thing you mentioned about the better athlete. Connecticut, statistically, according to Pro Football Focus, has a pretty good offensive line. So that's one thing for the Huskies to kind of hang their hat on is they have some of the best graded offensive linemen in college football. So, maybe one thing that you could say nice about Connecticut. I'm trying.
Look, they got, Jim Mora in as the new head coach. Seems like the right guy to maybe turn that program around.
Yeah.
I can remember in my lifetime UConn being at least a competent team.
Oh yeah.
Not anything to, not like BCS bowl type team, but it's a team that could, make a bowl game and compete back in the day. I remember NC State playing UConn up in Stores and that being a competitive game.
Yeah, Mike Glennon and them traveled up there, I want to say 2011. I believe it's the week after they lost to Tennessee in Atlanta.
Yeah.
And the winds apparently were howling so much that day that neither offense could do anything. It ended up being a 10-7 game. By the way, Mike Glennon, are the 49ers going to sign him, Justin? I know he worked out for the 49ers yesterday. They need a quarterback to back up.
They could. So here's the situation for the Niners. They've got now Jimmy Garoppolo back under center as their,
Yep.
luxury backup. But behind him, you've got Brock Purdy, Mr. Irrelevant from this year's draft, the last pick of the 2022 NFL draft. Now Purdy is impressed Kyle Shanahan in training camp, but when you've got a roster that's capable of going to a Super Bowl and you're one play away from handing the keys to a guy that's never taken an NFL snap in his life and was the last pick of the draft, that doesn't exactly inspire confidence. They have signed a former Virginia guy who has also never played a snap of NFL football in his life, but has jumped around the league to a couple different teams. I think he's on the practice squad now. So wouldn't shock me to see a guy like Mike Glennon get signed.
He worked out. So did Kelvin Harmon. The 49ers must have some NC State love in their scouting department.
Well, yeah, I mean they've had Dante Johnson for a while.
Contavious Street was on the team for a little bit. So.
No longer on the team, but was on the team for a bit. So yeah, we could, Carlos Rodon playing at Oracle Park right down.
He's gonna play for the Cubs next year.
Okay. Good luck.
Him and Trey Turner are reuniting on my favorite team. But to your point, yes, Connecticut was a competent team. I mean, well, look, when NC State scheduled this home and home, nobody blinked an eye about it. It was a perfectly acceptable, fine home and home to have on your schedule. Connecticut was that, team that kind of like you might view Temple now, right? I mean, kind of at times they can be good and get into a bowl game, or East Carolina, more local.
Yeah.
They were on par with all of that. In the 2016 season, it fell off the map, and they just have not recovered, and it's kind of inexplicable. I don't know. I do think they will have to make some hard decisions probably in Connecticut down the road about where they want to take this football program. Do they want to keep paying this much money? But yeah, it's going to be interesting. And actually, NC State goes back there next year at the other part of the home and home. So we'll see how much improvement. We'll see up close how much improvement they've made. But yeah, it'll be interesting.
I'm sure. I'm sure you've been counting down the days until you can go on that road trip up to Stores. But I guess a good way to wrap up this podcast. Let's do a game day watch for next week. So I think if I'm reading this correctly from one of your tweets, ESPN basically kicked the can down the road for giving a time out for NC State Clemson. I would assume that that's based on the results of what happens this week, including what happened. We know NC State's going to beat UConn. Knock on wood. That seems to be kind of a given. And Clemson's got an interesting game at Wake Forest. Although Demon Deacon struggled against Liberty last week, maybe they were looking ahead. Who knows? Typically, Clemson doesn't have much issue with Wake Forest. Kind of a physicality difference there, just a caliber of athlete type difference there. But that being said, if Wake Forest pulls the upset, obviously game day is not going to go to Clemson next week. But if these two teams win, what's your confidence meter, Matt? Can you see game day going to Clemson, and do you see it? I mean, could it be a prime time? Could it be a primetime game on ABC and not be the game day game?
Yeah, and they've done that before. I mean, look, I think the first game they were at Ohio State Notre Dame, and that was a Fox telecast, right? Noon telecast for Fox.
Yeah.
Look, they're about to spend a heck of a whole lot of money on the SEC too. And the SEC, the other option would be Alabama, Arkansas. So kind of building up that goodwill with going to Arkansas, which is not a traditional SEC stopping point for a game day, would also play a role. And I don't know how much they take into other considerations. Are they looking at weather? Because Justin knows I like my weather, and there's some early concerns about a tropical system that's kind of right now down there by the Caribbean islands that might be scooting into the Caribbean Sea and up through the Gulf of Mexico. And if you extrapolate the timing of it, think that it could become a rainstorm for the Carolinas right around Friday, Saturday next week.
So are you saying look ahead, maybe take the under?
But look, if Texas A&M beats Arkansas, I don't know what other choice game day has.
Yeah.
I mean, they do spend a lot of money on the ACC too, and it's worth the investment to the ACC be as good as possible. And that would be, if Texas A&M beats Arkansas, then NC State top 10 in the coaches poll, and probably number 11 at worst in the AP poll. So at that point, you're looking at a team that might be a top 10 matchup. Then at that point, I think it would have to be a slam dunk that it's coming to Clemson. So, I think 50-50, maybe slightly under if Arkansas win. Bet the house on it if Texas A&M wins. And, of course, Clemson got to be Wake Forest. So that's the other aspect of all of this. So.
All right. Well, we'll stay tuned. I'm kind of expecting a primetime game there, but wouldn't mind an earlier game.
Yeah, they I think it'll either be 3:30 or prime time. I hadn't looked to see what the other games they've designated for what times yet, so I don't know if they've already have something set up for noon or for 3:30 or for prime time. So without knowing that, I would assume 3:30 or prime time, and that'll make the decision, and then they go from there.
Well, we will see. We'll be back this weekend for a post-game reflections podcast for NC State UConn. So tune in, 7:30 p.m. Is it another RSN game?
Yeah,
Matt. Yep. So Bally Sports for those in North Carolina and the Raleigh area. 7:30 p.m. If you're not at Carter Finley Stadium, that is good tailgate week. Good tailgate week.
Weather is gonna be unbelievable this weekend. They were saying this is the fall weekend. Justin's missing it, but he lives in San Francisco, so they have nice weather most of the year. But I think the high on Saturday like 75, 76, low humidity. It's that perfect fall. You might even need a long sleeve shirt to get through the evening portions of the game. So
that's perfect.
Yeah, perfect weather.
And do they still do the halftime passes? Is that still a thing?
Yep.
Okay.
We're not going to go down that can of worms, Justin. So
I'm just saying, if it's a blowout, maybe have an extra one at halftime. Okay. All right. On that note, last reminders: subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to podcasts. Apple, Spotify, Google Play. We're also in video form on YouTube. So please subscribe to this YouTube channel, the Wolfpacker YouTube channel. Give this video a thumbs up and drop a comment while you're at it. We're on social media. You can follow our main account at the Wolfpacker on Twitter. You can follow me personally at Justin H. Will on Twitter. Give us a like on Facebook, NC State Wolfpack on thewolfpacker.com. Last but not least, take advantage of that special deal at thewolfpacker.com. For just $1, you get a year's worth of premium subscription to thewolfpacker.com. All the great content, part of the On3 network. So premium NC State athletics information, football, men's basketball, women's basketball, all the sports really. Insider information. As soon as the information comes out, as soon as the murmurs, you hear the whispers out there in West Raleigh, then it's going on the Wolfpacker message board. So be part of the conversation. Take advantage of that deal. For just $1, get a year's worth of premium subscription to thewolfpacker.com. All right. That's going to do it for this podcast. We'll see you guys this weekend. For Matt Carter, this is Justin Williams, and this has been the Wolfpacker Podcast.